All right. Let's see. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Samuel Schroff, and I'm the Dean's Ambassador for the UC Riverside School of Public Policy. I'm honored to serve as today's MC for a special seminar on navigating the future of transportation policy. This event is part of the UCR School of Public Policy Community Seminar Series, which brings policymakers, practitioners, and researchers to campus to speak about various public policy events. Before getting started, I'll first cover the format for this event. We'll have a guest speaker present for about an hour, and afterward, I will return to the podium here to moderate an audience Q&A with our guest speaker. Those in our audience joining us virtually, please input your questions via the Zoom Webinars Q&A feature. And for our in-person audience, please walk up to the middle aisle during the audience Q&A and speak into the mic loudly and clearly so that those joining us through Zoom can also hear you. At this point, I'm honored to introduce you to a distinguished guest speaker for today's event. Mr. Hassan Ekrada has over 35 years of public and private sector transportation planning and engineering experience in the region. As the former CEO of the San Diego Association of Governments, or SANDAG, he directed the day-to-day operations of the agency and implemented policies set by its governing board. In addition, Dr. Ekrada was the Chief Executive Officer of the SANDAG Service Bureau, the nonprofit public benefit corporation chartered by SANDAG. Before joining SANDAG in 2018, Dr. Ekrada worked for the Southern California Association of Governments, Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transportation Authority, and South Coast Air Quality Management District. Currently, Dr. Ekrada is an adjunct professor of the Planning School at USC and the Engineering School at UCLA. Dr. Ekrada holds bachelor's and master's degrees in civil and industrial engineering from Zaporozhye University in the former Soviet Union, a master's degree in civil engineering from UCLA, and a PhD candidacy in urban planning and transportation from USC. We are so honored he could join us today, and please join me in giving him a warm welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Samuel. Good morning. Oh, actually, good afternoon, sorry. Good afternoon to all of you. It's good to be with you. It's good to be back where my daughter was just 2 years ago. She graduated from here, went in to do her master's, and now she's actually working for a change. That's good. She's off the payroll. She's off my payroll. Welcome to all of you. Thank the Dean, Mark, for being here. So I was thinking, what am I going to tell you today that you don't know about transportation? And the same thing every week. I prepare myself to tell my students at USC and UCLA things that they don't know, things that they could learn. So let me start by asking you a question. Do you all drive? Anybody doesn't have a driver license? You don't?
No, I drive.
You drive. So you're all an expert in transportation. That's all it takes to be an expert is a driver license to know how to drive. But here's the question. Why do we call freeways freeways? Because it's government subsidized. Anybody else? Most people think it's freeways because government paid for them and they're free. But actually they're freeways because it's an engineering term. They're free flowing, there's no signals. That's why they call freeways. It's not because they're free. They're never free. I mean, we paid for them one way or another, right? I spent my career in transportation / public policy. And I can tell you that transportation is so critical to our lives, whether it's in moving people or moving goods, that we must get it right. So let's go back in history a little bit. In the beginning of 1800s, what do you think was the dominant mode of transportation? Just after our nation was created. What? I didn't hear it. Yeah, go. It's for sure horses, all of that. But it's really the beginning was the steam ships, right? Then the railroads in the middle of the century came into, and the federal government handed millions of acres to the railroads because they wanted to make sure people and goods are moved. But then at the end of the 1800s, like a new era of building highways. You know who was the biggest advocates for building highways in the 1800s? Was the railroads. Why do you think that is? Because in their mind, if we build roads, they can access their station. Therefore, they actually were the biggest lobby in the US to build roads. And these roads were for horse carriages, you know, a paved road. And then Mr. Ford, in the end of the 1800s, beginning of 1900, the engine was here and the car came into play. And a mass production of the car in 1920s started, and that changed everything about transportation in the United States. You know, just until World War II, 1940s, railroads were still dominant mode. But then after the war, the decline in railroads was very evident, and the car took over. If you're too young to remember this, but those who lived in this region in the 1950s and 60s know that there were wonderful rail system called the red cars that used to go from Riverside, San Bernardino to Los Angeles to Orange County. And that system was ceased to exist in the beginning of the 1960s. Why do you think that system ceased to exist? Who was what was the main reason why this system got away? The car companies and the oil companies and tire companies, they want to sell their product. And so they bought the real estate and, you know, they redevelop it. And all of this massive right-of-way for railroads was replaced by what we call today the interstate system and the roadway system. In Southern California, we have over 67,000 miles of roads. 67,000. Everything we did in this region in the last 5-6 decades was designed around the car. Everything. Where we build our houses, where we will build our logistics, everything was around transportation. And it was around the freeways. And people wonder, why is it that we don't have a great number of people using transit today? And the answer is really simple. The car is a convenient mode, let's face it. When somebody moves to own a car, it's like they think that they're more free to move around, which is true. But what the car culture created is tremendous challenges that I was telling the students earlier, the dean ambassadors, I was telling them those challenges, it's up on them to solve them. Our generation created them and you need to solve them. And what are those challenges? Of course, congestion is one challenge. But pollution is another. Greenhouse gas emission is a third. A tremendous dependence on the car has created pretty much a significant number of population in our region that do not have access to car have a hard time getting from A to B. Let me explain to you that in this region, in Southern California, and when I say Southern California, it's the 6 counties, not including San Diego. The 6 counties, we have about 4% of the population that don't own a car. or have access to a car. And they found themselves needing to use public transportation to get from A to B to do all their transport needs. But unfortunately, a trip that takes 20 minutes in the car will take 2 hours in transit. And one would think, why is that? Because we didn't build our cities and our towns and our regions for transit. We build it for cars. We build it around cars. So this challenge of trying to have access to opportunities for all people is a tremendous challenge that people need to face. Congestion and air pollution, of course. The question is our dependence on the car sustainable into the future? Will technology play a role in changing that trend? These are questions that if you know the answer to, you will be rich, very rich. So how many of you have been to Europe? The Far East. So I recently traveled to China. I flew into Shanghai and needed to go to Beijing. And I had several choices. I could have driven for 10, 11 hours, could have flew, but I decided instead to take high-speed rail. At a speed of about 400 kilometers per hour, you get from Shanghai to Beijing. It's actually longer than between Los Angeles and New York in like 4.5 hours. Beautiful ride. And makes you wonder, why don't we have high-speed rail in our nation? Right? We're trying in California. We've been trying for the last 20 years to build one single line that connects San Diego, Los Angeles to San Francisco. And we're still building it. Still building it. And it's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be in operation anytime soon. And if it is, it will be operational in the Central Valley of California. Very sad, right? So why does high-speed rail works in Europe, works in the Far East, in the Middle East? Why doesn't it work here? Anybody want to answer why aren't we a nation that have high-speed rail? Yeah?
No incentive. People are used to truck transportation, driving transportation. People are used to that way for it.
Yeah, there's no incentive. Of course, again, our lives are designed for the car, around the car. And, you know, honestly, the cost of changing that is tremendous. But the real reason why we are unsuccessful in building a rail system that works is because of our densities. We're spread out, we're everywhere, because we were designed around the car, right? And because of our financial systems that support public transportation. So let me tell you this, when any of you take a bus here in Riverside, okay, if you take a bus, you pay fare. What do you pay? $2? $2.50. Do you know that fare you pay covers about 20% of the cost of running that system? Where's the other 80% comes from? Subsidies. Where does it come from? Your taxes and mine. The people say it comes from the government, but the government, unless they print money, which they do in Washington, but unless they print money, it comes from taxes. So can you imagine if you paid the full cost of that bus ride, it will be very expensive. And when you think about it, in your mind, the cost of filling your gas up with gas is probably less than the cost will cost you to ride transit. That's the perception. That's how we grew up thinking. The cost structure of our transportation system does not lend itself for us to use other modes. So with all these challenges that we have today, we build a massive network of highways. And then California wanted to lead the world in combating climate change. By the way, before I go any further, does anybody think that climate change is a hoax here, right? Because some people still actually believe that it's I hope you don't. You're in a great school of public policy here. But California is trying to be an example of how to combat climate change. And you know that almost 50% of greenhouse gas emission, 50%, almost half, comes from transportation related. So unless we figure out transportation, we can never combat climate change. Greenhouse gas emission, half of the greenhouse gas emission comes from people, goods, movement, and related industries. And the state of California has put laws in place, whereas as a CEO of Sandag in San Diego, a CEO of SCAG here, we had to actually meet a per capita reduction in 2035. This is the law in California. But is it working? Are we reducing greenhouse gas emissions? And the answer is still probably not. We actually trying really hard. And so people say, well, let's not worry about greenhouse gas emission because if we all drive electric cars, that issue will go away. Do you agree? Well, maybe the greenhouse gas emission would be better with electric cars, but it will depend on how you generate electricity. You know, if you continue to generate electricity from fossil fuels, you're not eliminating totally greenhouse gas emissions. But at the same time, if we all drove electric cars, congestion doesn't change. We still have the same congestion. Whether you drive electric or gasoline-powered cars, you're still consuming the roadway. So what is it that we need to do to overcome these challenges in transportation? Build more public transportation, build more high-speed rail. And to do that, we really need to change the urban form. We need to change the land use. We need to change the way we develop. We can no longer allow a single family homes in 5 acres in the Inland Empire if we truly want to build a compact society for transit. Now, the biggest challenge in the United States and the biggest challenge for public policy students who's going to be leading in the future is the fragmented nature of our government. So who's in charge of building transportation? I can look you in the eye and say, Sandag and SCAG are in charge. I was in charge. I had a $1.4 billion annual budget agency. I built transportation. I'm in charge. We go. Report for a board of directors, tell them what to do. Everything's great. But who's in charge of land use? It's not Sandag or SCAG, it's the local agencies. It is the city of Riverside and the city of Hamilton and the city of San Bernardino. So the people in charge of providing transportation are not the same people in charge of building the urban form. And that's the disconnect. That's the fragmenting government. It's not the national or state governments that are in charge of land use. It's the local government. And for them, this is a sacred cow. God forbid somebody from a regional agency tell a city what to do. When I was at SCAG, I had 191 members, cities. I used to go to every city council and tell them to promise them not to tell anybody, but they're my favorite city. Actually, they believe it for a while until it got out that everyone is my favorite city. So the land use, the urban form is a sacred cow for local cities. The regional agencies that get their money from the state and federal government are in charge of providing transportation. There's a disconnect. How you overcome that? I say one way to overcome that is by having a lot of money and bribing a lot of cities, providing funding for cities to do the right thing. Asking cities, for example, when you build a rail line, how many of you took the Metrolink system? Okay, that Metrolink system, if you drive it, there is many stations along the way. I used to take that all the time to go to Los Angeles. Those stations are ghost parking lots. There's absolutely nothing on them, and scary to be there after dark. Instead, in any developed nation in the world, Europe, Far East, Middle East, these stations are a sign of life. These stations should be all like New York Grand Central, where people live, work, entertain, have a cup of coffee, watch a movie. That's what these stations should be, not a ghost parking lots. And that is when land use and transportation could work together. And that is one way, actually, you could start making some changes toward linking transportation and land use. So we spend a lot of money every year, every single year, in maintaining our transportation system. In California, the annual budget for the Department of Transportation is about 30 billion with a B. I mean, because we talk these kind of numbers a lot, we don't realize how large this number is. Most countries in the world don't have an annual budget of $10 billion. And here we have a Department of Transportation have an annual budget of 3 times that. And so if you take all this money we're spending on transportation and all the challenges that this is creating for us, there is something wrong in that equation. We spend a lot of money. We're the 5th largest economy in the world. California, the only larger economies are the US, China, France, and Germany. We're larger than any other country in the world when it comes to the economy. So if we're the 5th largest economy in the world, if in San Jose we house 5 of the biggest 500 companies in the world, how come we cannot solve this simple transportation challenging problem of making sure that we don't pollute into the air, greenhouse gas emission is reduced. At the same time, people can get from A to B. At the same time, we don't create injustices in the process. You know, I have to say, transportation is responsible for a lot of the sins in the US. Transportation divided communities a lot. And mostly these communities are those that were unable to advocate for themselves. It wasn't the Beverly Hills or the La Jolla of the communities. It is mostly the poor and low-income communities. The last 5 years, I was the CEO at Sandag. Had about 600 employees, $1.3 billion annual budget to build transportation for one county, San Diego, 3.3 million people. So if you're familiar, on the other side of San Diego, there is Baja California, Tijuana, and the other cities. Baja California is about 3.7 million people. I used to say that San Diego, 3.3 million people, Baja California, 3.7, a total of 7 million. That's what you need to plan for, because those two regions are so connected economically and culturally and otherwise, it's almost impossible to forget about that. So one of the biggest projects I was glad to be part of was a border crossing between Tijuana and San Diego called Otay Mesa. Right now, I don't know how many of you ever crossed the border. If you're unlucky, you could be waiting at the crossing for 4 hours. That's a lot of time. A lot of time for trucks to idle for 4 hours to cross the border. So with this border crossing we built in San Diego, we're guaranteeing a 20-minute wait time, but it's going to cost you. It's called dynamic pricing. So if you way into Mexico and way into the US, you will get a sign saying that if you want to use this border crossing, you will save 3 hours and will cost you $20. If you're a truck driver, or it costs you $15 if you're a passenger. And if you value your time, it's fine. But this is an important crossing, not only because it allows you to get in fast, but because all these emissions of idling trucks and cars are no longer there. So in San Diego, you have the South San Diego, which is next to the border, and you have La Jolla, one of the most expensive places in the country. And if you drive through La Jolla, you wouldn't see a single freeway. There's freeways nearby, but not there. You won't see a single light rail line. And these communities didn't want that and had the power and know-how not to have them. But the communities in the South, the low-income and minority, have all of those things. La Jolla had a great job center next to UCSD, University of California in San Diego. So transportation was responsible for, I call them sins of the past. And it's up to us to make sure we overcome these sins. Those divided communities somehow need to be connected again. Those low-income and minorities who were actually had to, something called gentrification, has to move out of where they grew up just because they couldn't afford it anymore, is as a result of transportation. So as a professional in this business, as an adjunct professor who's teaching, I say we have not only a moral responsibility, but we have a professional duty to make sure we overcome these challenges and make sure they never happen again. And so I feel for you, student who's graduating into this world to solve all these challenges. They're big, they're huge, they're tremendous. But I have faith that if we're willing to invest and if we're willing to deploy the technology we have today, we can get there. You know, people in San Diego, I don't know if you follow the media there, if you read the media, I was the most awful person in the world one day, and the next day I walk in water. Here I'm building a multi-billion-dollar project, but at the same time, I'm an awful guy. I'm doing things that's San Diego politics for you. So people used to ask me, I proposed that San Diego International Airport in downtown does not have any rail going to the airport. The rail goes by the airport, but not to the airport. And so I propose that we get rail into the airport. Like Los Angeles International Airport next year is going to have the people mover. When I was in Los Angeles, I advocated for that, and it took a while, but it's going to finally be here before the Olympics. So in San Diego, when I proposed that, and the cost is about $1.8 billion, they said, oh my God, that's too expensive and it's going to take a lot of time. And here's my answer to them, to the skeptics, that I will challenge anybody to name anything in the world, in the history, that was worth anything, that didn't cost a lot of money and take a lot of time? Anything. You can't. And when you measure cost in terms of 1.8 billion is too much, but we're talking about generational benefits. You know, when I was here in Los Angeles advocating for the subway system, and I don't know how many of you took the subway, nice subway system in LA. Now, very soon, next few months, you're going to be able to take the subway all the way to Santa Monica, to the beach, to UCLA, where I teach right now. Do you know what was the cost per mile for that subway to the sea? Anybody want to guess? How many millions? Nobody want to guess? How many? 10 million? How about more? Much more. 200 million, a bit more. A billion. A mile. That's too expensive, yes. That's a lot of money, no question. But honestly, if I take this to be a generational thing, over 500 to 600 years ahead, if I know that Los Angeles, with all its traffic else, yeah, it's a lot of money, but it's needed. $1 billion a mile. That's what it costs to get commuters from downtown Los Angeles to Santa Monica Beach and to UCLA. It's costly to build transportation projects, but any project that worth anything is going to cost much money. And, you know, we had COVID in our lives. I was just giving a talk and somebody asked me, so what's like as a CEO when you first heard that COVID is here? And I'm not kidding you. We were notified Friday that nobody goes to work Monday. And when you have 600 employees, you want them working. What do you do? So you write an email and you say, we're going to have to work from home tomorrow. And my CFO and my IT director called me and says, we only have 5 PCs agency-wide. It's okay, we purchased them over the weekend. Oh, well, we have limits in our purchasing power. Okay, we'll use credit cards. But all of a sudden, from a Friday to a Monday, you go to the office and nobody's there. You go into your train and nobody's there. So it looks like life has changed. And ever since, we try to, overcome this. But life will never be the same after COVID. Today, downtown San Francisco is dead. Pretty much, you could buy, with the price of your house here in Southern California, you could buy a commercial building there. Downtown San Diego is beginning to struggle. Downtown Los Angeles will too, because people are not working in downtowns. They're telecommuting. But what happened to traffic? So remember, we have data to measure pre-COVID and after COVID. Actually, when you measure in the Los Angeles area and Southern California, there is more traffic now than it was pre-COVID. There is more vehicle miles traveled now than was pre-COVID. But almost 2/3 of employees don't go to the office. So why is that? Why do we have more traffic? What do you think?
Population increase, people are driving.
When people are not working, when you work, you're most likely going to take that trip to the work, maybe do a few things on the way to work, and the trip back home. But you're not working, you're driving everywhere. You're taking a break at 10 o'clock and going to the store or coffee shop. And so people accumulate more travel when they're not working from the office. And that's actually supported by data right now. So we have more traffic today than pre-COVID, even though 80% of the work trips has been eliminated. I will tell you, we were hoping in the 1990s, when I worked for Metro, we were saying, oh my God, if we could just get 5% of Angelenos to telecommute, we will solve the traffic problem in LA. Here we have 80% of them telecommute and we're not solving the problem. People will drive. People have that free access to that car, they will drive, especially with gas prices here. But in our concept might be way up in the $5 or $6. But in Europe, they have been paying $10 a gallon for the last 2 decades. Most of it is taxes. But in our perception, if we pay about 10 to 15% of our income into transportation, that's very low. So we drive, and we're going to continue to drive unless something happens. And then people say, well, you know, things will change. Technology is going to take over. Driverless cars are going to be here. How many of you have been in a driverless car? Okay, so how did you feel? You hated it. Right now, actually, you could put your name in line to get into a taxi service in Los Angeles that started in a route, driverless. And every single person who got in that said, I will never do it again. Right? I remember in the 2000s, we used to forecast that by 2020, we will have 25% of the fleet driverless cars. Here we are in 2024, we have 0%. Even our laws has not changed to allow driverless cars yet. Now, there is 5 levels of driverless cars. There is level 0, which is the old car, nothing. There is level 1, which you could have one device in the car that's automated, like the speed control. Yeah, that's level 1. Level 2, you have one or more, like maybe a speed control and a braking system. Level 3 is what you have in Tesla today. So you could actually purchase the level 3 where you have to hold the steering, but you don't have to do anything else. That's level 3. Level 4, you don't even have to hold the steering. You don't have even to be in the car. We don't have a lot of level 4. We don't even have a lot of level 3. We're still at level 2. But here, what I think technology is going to do, and then we're gonna open it for a Q&A. Technology is going to allow households to own less cars. Because technology will allow you to have access to a car without owning a car. Right now with Uber and Lyft, Uber and Lyft have changed since 95, have changed the way we look at things. But do you know that Uber and Lyft is actually losing 40 cents on the dollar? You know, public transportation is subsidized. Uber and Lyft is subsidized, except in this case by Wall Street, by people bidding in the future, other than government. But the fact that you have an on-demand service like Uber and Lyft is going to allow some people to say, instead of owning 2 cars, I could live with 1. And if I needed an extra couple of things, I will call that service. I think the future tends to be where you're going to share a car and have the same convenience of owning it. There is a very widespread industry now in Europe called car sharing, where you put your name somewhere, you share a car in a neighborhood, and if you want it, you just let them know ahead of time and have access to a car. Car sharing is, and mobility as a service is possible. Right now we pay utility bills, right? Electricity. If we use electricity and a base, it has a price. You pay it every month. If you do more, you pay higher price. I think transportation would be like that. There is an industry that's spreading out called mobility as a service. You subscribe to a company for all your mobility needs and will be provided to you whenever you need it. But if you go over a base, you pay more. Mobility as a service. That could be part of the future transportation. But the bottom line is this. We need to overcome these challenges that transportation created for us, no matter what the technology brings. You know, people talk about AI and how this is going to change. This is not going to change our dependence on the car. And this is not going to change our dependence on the truck to get our products to our doors. And maybe those trucks will be drones in the future. But still, a mode of transportation is going to have to deliver those products. I will say this. In our nation, for everything that went right, there is things that went wrong. And before we go anywhere, we have to correct those wrongs. And for us to sustain ourselves into the future, we must promote multimodalism. We must promote not only the car, but we must promote public transportation. We must promote biking and walking. You know, people say, why don't people walk and bike more here? Why should they? If you're willing to lose your life, you can bike. There isn't these transportation facilities separated for you to feel safe, or for you to feel safe to let your kids bike or walk. Some cities now in the Inland Empire are doing the right thing by putting a good sidewalk and bikeable places, but still, we have a lot to learn. I tried in San Diego to build a connected network of bikeways, and that's expensive. It's in the billions of dollars for the county. People would like it, people will promote it, especially if they use it for a while. But you have to show that you actually can do that. Multimodalism is important. You don't want people to ride the buses if they don't want to. You want to have choices for people. And these choices have to be equal. You can't expect a person to take a bus if it's going to take 2 hours for a trip that takes 20 minutes in the car. You're going to have to make that bus trip exactly as convenient, as safe, as frequent as the bus trip. So for those who are trying to solve these amazing public policy issues that emerges from this transportation system, you have a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do. As I tell my students, your ability to solve this problem will be measured by how well you critically think about putting all of this together. Not a single solution, but a solution that encompasses a lot of things that you need to do. And you know, while our lives have changed after COVID, one thing didn't change, and that's our dependence on driving. The work trip is a very small portion. 20% of all trips are work trips. We still have 80% of the trips to take care of. And the last, I would say, being a resident of the Inland Empire, the Inland Empire has a lot of work to do to overcome this perception that we're all is places to build housing and warehousing for goods to be stored. The Inland Empire has to be more, especially with great universities like UCR in the middle. So transportation in the US is still in flux. We're trying to learn the next era, and the era of this technology and what's going to bring to us, and whether we can sustain ourselves into the future. Should we promote a network of high-speed rails to connect our nation? You know, when the interstate was built, President Eisenhower decided we're going to build the interstate system, and he needed to get the Congress to approve the expenditure. And you know what was the two reasons he justified the interstate system? Commerce and national defense, right? And people thought, yeah, that makes sense. We need to find good reasons like this to combat climate change, to build a multimodal system and convince our leaders in Washington and the state that it's worth paying for it. Look, the interstate system is a great system at the time. When we built it, we didn't think about all these externalities: congestion, loss of productivity, energy, dependence on oil, etc., on foreign oil especially. But now we know these challenges, we need to solve them. And technological advances, you know, electric cars might be a solution for one problem, but we need to solve the sources of the energy. Look, regardless of whether it's fossil fuel or electric energy, you need the sources of energies to be worked out. You cannot have, and still do not have, 100% way to generate energy from solar and sun. So we have to figure all these things out. While the challenges and opportunities are there for you, I think the challenges is more prevalent than ever before. And I would hope to see some of you in my classes at USC or UCLA, or maybe here when I teach here. All right, thank you. I'm ready to take your questions now.
You can stay up here.
I can stay.
Well, thank you for such an insightful presentation. At this point, we're going to move into our Q&A session, and this would also be a good time if you want to grab some refreshments from the back. So just as a reminder, for the in-person audience, please come up to this middle mic here and speak your question loudly and clearly so that a Zoom audience can hear you. And for those on a Zoom webinar, please go ahead and input your questions into the Q&A feature on the Zoom webinar. And one of the ambassadors will pose your question to our speaker.
Sure, thank you so much for the presentation.
Oh, of course.
So my name is Jackie. I'm actually a local elected. I'm on the city council of the city of Corona. And I was really intrigued by your comment about how the policy wonks and the policy implementers don't really merge. And I see that every day. I have a master's in public policy, and so I consider myself kind of straddling both worlds. That being said, what I would love to hear from you is, in your experience, what were some real, practical, tangible tools that you incorporated so that the policy makers actually got the policy right when it comes to transportation?
Right, great question. This working? Great question. Council member, right? Corona. So I one on my board from Corona was, she's a supervisor now. Yes, Spiegel, she was. And I really admire the fact that you have your education in public policy. Now you're a council member. I will say the art of consensus building is the tool I use the most to bridge these two. The policy hangs from the people who don't want to do anything. I think incentivizing cities to do the right thing and showing them data to show that actually sometimes mixed land use development is better than a single family homes in many acres. Showing them real example from around the world of cities that went into I call it multimodalism, cities that went into densifying in certain places, cities that were willing to actually make these ghost parking lots a place where people come and entertain and live and work is something good for the city. At SCAG, when I was the CEO of SCAG, we had 6 counties. Orange County, LA County, Riverside, San Bernardino, Ventura County, and Imperial, believe it or not. So different. How do you get a board that represents all these counties to think alike? And that is the genius of building consensus. You're not going to get everything you want, but at least sometimes you get something that everybody will get something out of. So you, being a public policy graduate, you can understand that the world of public policy is built around getting what you can for a cause that you define your performance objective very well for. And I believe the incentivizing approach, showing data, for example, any city that doesn't have a good walkable, bikeable place would actually, a city is not sustained in the future. And how do you convince a city to spend precious money that they have on working with regional agencies to build transportation by allowing the regional agencies to do other things so they can invest in your city? I think we didn't talk about it today, but cities need to get out of this. This is my city and I don't care what happens somewhere else, because you have to care. You cannot exist in a vacuum anymore, especially in today's technologies. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, but it just doesn't stop. And I'm sorry. So it resonates and it answers the question, but it doesn't connect to my reality as a local elected. Why? And I think there's a lot of layers to it. I think, the way that we elect local electeds and whether or not it's sustainable for folks to be a local elected, it has a lot to do with it. Because this whole thinking as a region, it's a thing that everyone says, but nobody does.
Yeah, I get you. I tell you this. I was telling the Dean ambassadors earlier. It's very unfortunate. I migrated to this country in 1984, and the greatest country on earth. I'm so glad I came here and met my wife here, have my kids here. But it's not the same country I came to in 1984. Today, we're such a divided nation. We either can be in the left or the right, nothing in the middle. And that makes a job of a council member really difficult if you want to do the right thing. And you probably most likely lose the election if you try to do the right thing. And that's reflected more in our national policy. Ideally, local policies should feed the national policies. But what's happening right now is what's happening at the national level is actually making us behave the same way here. That's why I'm always proud to say I have no party affiliation, because I think both parties are corrupt. Sorry to say it, but that's how I feel. And I say that when I came to this country, there used to be Republicans and Democrats working together for the country. And I see very little of that right now.
Yeah, it's very partisan.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. So you're absolutely right. The reality is people who try to do the right thing usually don't get reelected.
But your take on consensus building is well heard. It seems to be like the only answer, the hardest answer, the only answer to getting anything done.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, look, if you're not willing to lose an election, don't lead.
Yeah.
Leadership is it's a whole topic, but if you want to lead, you have to be willing to lose something like a seat that you're hold so near and dear to. Otherwise, you cannot lead, especially today. Great question.
I'm a previous employee at the city of Corona and DWP.
Okay.
I did graduate studies at Boston University on energy and environmental policy. So I become a big walking nerd on public policy. And
Okay.
I just have two questions.
Yeah.
I worked in the city of Santa Monica and we were looking at
Del Mar,
city of Santa Monica,
Santa Monica.
yeah, in the sustainability office. And we were looking at our transportation and trying to meet the goals for going fully electric. The issue that we had is there are buses with very far distance all the way to LA, and given the weight of the trucks, electric trucks, we'd have to have two fleets. And so they decided to go with natural gas, but eventually under state law, they have to. Do you have kind of any insight of the development of these technologies and if other cities or counties are using fully electric fleets?
Look, right now it's becoming very sexy to say we're gonna turn the fleet into electric fleet. Let us take Metro, for example. Metro runs a large bus operation. They have about 2,000 of them. To turn the fleet in Metro into electric would need about $40 to $50 billion. Now, do calculate the benefit of converting the fleet to electric versus natural gas or hydrogen power, and look at the cost. And what could you do with the $50 billion when it comes to climate change? I think this converting the fleets to electric, because it sounds sexy, is overrated. I think you should balance the cost with the environmental benefit before you go and say we want to convert the fleet. And the last I would say, especially in California, because the governor have an executive order, says all cars sold in California starting in 2035 has to be electric. And I like some of these policies, but I ask back, is the grid system can handle all electric fleet in California? We have even blackouts right now. So we have to think these things through. But to be specific to you, I think you shouldn't go for the sexy, you should go for the analytics of what works, whether it's hydrogen cell, natural gas. I would say if it's cheaper to do natural gas and you can get more of it, so be it.
Yeah, I had several stressful discussions with our sustainability panel, the idea of converting all gas stoves in restaurants to, electric, and just looking at like old buildings, a lot of multifamily, low income seniors, and I'm like, well, who's going to change all of their? It's not just a quick switch out of a different thing. They have to actually have the infrastructure. So I was telling that, and then the other thing is if you're on coal and you switch to electric, then you're actually probably worse off.
Yes, absolutely. And it depends how you generate electricity too.
Yeah.
Right now we use fossil fuel to generate electricity. And look, there is a cost, like my daughter who graduated from here, just finished her master from US, she decided she wanted to have a Tesla. Okay, fine. I encourage people to be environmentally conscious. So she wanted to buy a Tesla, but then we realized that you have to equip the house with a certain equipment to be able to charge a Tesla. So we did that. A cost of $2,500, right? But then you don't realize if you charge your Tesla, a full charge of a Tesla can provide electricity for about 110 households. This is not that simple. Oh, let's convert the fleet. Sounds really sexy and good. Well, let's think it through. Remember, imagine 110 household electricity spender is just to charge a Tesla over 24 hours. So I think you have to balance all of these things before you put your goals through. I am all for all electric fleet, but I also want to think about how am I going to generate that electricity? I'm not going to have blackouts, that it's fair and equitable for all people.
And I work for local agencies, cities, and Washington, and we found a lot of these state mandates are done, and we have to work to kind of interprets the law to reality
Yeah.
as well as possible.
Interpretation of the law is, right, let's put it this way. If a law requires a lot of interpretation, then you have to question that law. And unfortunately, these new laws are here quickly. And, you know, I tried as a CEO of an agency that has to comply with state laws. It's really hard sometimes to understand where these laws land. Yeah. Good question.
My second question, sorry, that was kind of
Yeah.
a very long one, is I know, I was wondering if there's any financial impact in regards to the increased electric cars on the highway maintenance, because it's, you know, it's through gas tax, and these people aren't paying gas tax. So is there a way, one is it limited on budget increasing the supply of, because we're having more cars not paying? Or if I've heard something about the registration is higher, is there anything we're doing to address that issue?
So I have the wounds to show in San Diego because I promote converting gas tax to vehicle mile travel tax. I was the most hated person. That's why I said the newspaper, if you pick the Union Tribune, one day I walk in water, the next day I'm horrible. Right now, if you drive an electric car, until last year, the law last year, you paid zero toward maintenance of the highways. Zero, zilch. Because you're not paying the taxes in gasoline that used to or maintain the last year. There's a law that put some registration fee on electric cars, but that's a small portion. Not only electric, all cars are getting efficient. So we consume less fuel, which is good. That means you pay less taxes. As a matter of fact, the federal gas tax has not changed since 1993. We paid 18 cents per gallon in 93, and we pay 18 cents per gallon in 2024. Imagine the value of that 18 cents in 93, and there's almost no value. So the gas tax is not indexed. With cars becoming more efficient, we're going to generate less revenues, especially if more electric car comes in. So we have to convert. We must convert gas tax to a user-based fee. But that's politically so unpopular. If you talk about it, you could be, you know, some cases you could be threatened. So I think we must convert, because at one point we're not going to have money to maintain what we have if we don't do that. Great question. Any other question?
Hello. So we actually have two questions from our Zoom audience. One of them, an anonymous entity was asking, you said 10 to 50% of our income on transportation is low. That's still a pretty significant expense. However, it's in educating the public as to how costs have been reduced, how have they been made, and if so, have they been effective?
Spend some 15 to 20% of our income on transportation. I never intended to say it's low. By any means, it's not low. But my point there is if we bought gas at $10 per gallon, like Europe did, and if we paid the tariffs that they pay when they buy a car, then I think your cost will become 30 or 40%. Then you will think twice about owning two cars, let alone owning one. So the point here is costs matter. The reason I promoted, still promote, will continue to promote pricing. I made this statement and I will continue to make it. In recent Time magazine interview, I said, bad pricing kills good planning. You could have the best plan there is. If you don't price the system right, it will not work. So by us getting into a system, if I knew there is a charge for me to get into the 91, the 60, and that charge is higher after 3 o'clock, I'll try my best to get there before 3 o'clock. That's human nature. We respond to prices. So my point about the 15, 20%, the perception of it being a lot, which is a lot, But you could be paying more truly if we want to design our system and price it right. Okay? Laura, go ahead.
Yes. Thank you so much. My name is Laura Sosa. I work for the School of Public Policy. But my question maybe is a little different. I'm a local resident here in Riverside and kind of live on the perimeter of the city that is now been overtaken by warehouses. And a lot of my neighbors are very active in the community to try to stop this. But the train is already gone, right? The train left the track. What else should we be doing as residents to protect ourselves from what is being brought in by, the building of these facilities, and what other things should we be thinking about to advocate for ourselves?
Great question.
Thank you.
So, in most cities right now, not just Riverside, most cities, anywhere, what would prevent a city from permitting a more dense housing is the existing resident of the houses. So I have a house in the Inland Empire and I value my house and I put a lot of money in my house and I got used to a lifestyle and I don't want that to be disrupted. Therefore, I don't want to welcome anything new. That's what most of us think, unfortunately. And at council meetings where things get decided, the council hears from the 3 or 4 people in the public that usually come to every meeting but does not represent the whole city. And therefore, if you truly want to do something, you need to build an advocacy around what you're trying to advocate and not let these 3 or 4 people to speak in your behalf at council meeting, because that's what gets decided actually by, that's one. Number 2, look, progress has a price. I know my own family don't like to say this, but when I moved to San Diego, I was there 5 years. I decided to live in downtown San Diego. And I decided to live there because I wanted to walk to the office, about 1.1 mile. And when I moved there, it was beautiful. I could see the bay, the water, sit in the patio, relax. And then the Navy of the United States, in San Diego, the Navy is a big presence, built high rises, so blocked my view. And the Navy commander is a good friend through work. And I used to tell him, you blocked my view, I'm going to sue you. But he said, well, I'm going to remind you what you told me, that progress has a price. Progress has a price. We all have to pay that price. Are we willing? I mean, like the councilwoman just alluded to, reality is different than me giving the speeches here. But if you're willing to lead and tell those residents that what we're bringing to the neighborhood is good overall and not get elected and be willing to do that, then be it. As a resident, I think you should be an open-minded to the fact that what we had in the last 50 years is not sustainable into the future, cannot be sustainable. One of the reasons, it's unfortunate, we have great universities in the Inland Empire, UCR, Cal State San Bernardino, Redlands. We graduate brilliant kids like yourselves. But what happened to these kids? They don't stay in the Inland Empire because they don't have opportunities in the Inland Empire. So they leave. They go to LA, to San Francisco, to San Diego. That will only change if we try to change our mentality about what the Inland Empire. We can't just continue to say, I want to continue living in my 5-acre single-family home. Even though the reality, like the councilman alluded to, is that's the way it is right now. Somebody's going to have to lead. Somebody's going to have to change that narrative at one point. Great question. Any other question?
Hello, my name is Lorelai. I'm from City Legislature, City Council, or City Commissioner, and co-founder of Trump Council Future.
Okay. Okay.
My city has a early metro train station coming soon. Unfortunately, it's not expected until 2035. And my city council is open to higher densities, better land use, things like that. But the city it's very small. It's not wide, 60,000 people. And the demographic tends to skew much older, almost retirement home. And they don't seem eager to make any moves for at least the next 10 years because the train's not going to be there.
Mhm.
What would you recommend in this situation to try and get progress
Okay.
moving before that?
Yes. Great question. I think I've been to your city. It's a great city. I'll give you another example of another city, Culver City. If you were in Culver City 20 years ago, you would say, oh my God, I don't want to be here. But if you were in Culver City 5 years ago, you would say, this is the place where I want to be. They built an amazing public transportation system, amazing bikeable, walkable places, etc. Until last year, their council turned, and now they're trying to take away those amenities that made Culver City actually. My daughter works in LA. I had to co-sign with her for her to afford $100,000 job to afford space in Culver City. Now the council has changed, and they're taking away everything that made the city what it is. And the reason is because you have residents who don't want to change. You have those residents you're talking about that says, well, I'm a senior, I'm going to be gone in 10 years, and therefore I don't want anything to happen. This is where civic leadership is important. You cannot plan a community, a development, a city based on what few people want, but based on what you think as a leader is good for the community. And look, we live in a democracy. Democracies are messy, right? You can't just go decide. You have to get people with you. If you want to build a high-speed rail system in China, you could get a letter from the Politburo of the Communist Party and you're done. You want to build a system here, you have to do public outreach and you have to do meetings, etc. So democracy is missing. But at the end of the day, you get a good product that is a result. In this case, you don't want to be undemocratic. You want to be insensitive to the senior folks who live there. But at the same time, you need to understand that this is about the city and about the future, about the sustainability of the city. And like we talked earlier, this is about people willing to lead versus people just want to grab into their seat and sit there. By the way, I have a lot of friends who are mayors and council members. I mean, they were my bosses at these agencies, but they were friends too. And I honestly, my advice to them, it's not worth it for them. If they cannot express their true feelings, because oftentimes they cannot because of the politics. And they're probably better off not being in this position. But if you come into a city you want to lead, know that you could lose your seat because you want to do the right thing. And that might happen oftentimes until we get to a point as a nation where people who want to lead are respected. We'll see. We're not there yet. But I wish you well. I mean, the Artesia is, you are developing densities there, so. And LA Metro has a lot of lines could work there. But you need to change like Culver City, and you cannot change back when you change also. No.
To kind of follow up, you said that you work for LA Metro and policy outreach and whatnot was very important. What did you find helpful most with education and gaining public approval?
Gaining the public trust through education and public outreach is probably the most critical thing a regional agency could do. But if you work for Metro, this is an agency. I don't know how many of you know this, but the board of Metro is 13 members. For a county of 10 million people, you know who the 13 members are? The mayor has 4, mayor of Los Angeles, the 5 supervisor, that's 9, and the rest of the county has 3. And that lies the problem. Representation on that board should be different for you to be able to do the education and outreach you want. Metro is a big place, and LA is facing tremendous challenges when it comes to traffic. I think we're investing tens of billions of dollars in transit, and I hope it's going to work. But the only time it's going to work if we price the system right, if we do what New York is doing right now, every person coming to Manhattan want to park all day is going to pay $200 to $300. Right now, I could park in downtown Los Angeles all day for $5. That's not going to work. So I would say education outreach, but also education based on actual data that gives information, real information. Great question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Kenneth, and I come from the Philippines. So I was just wondering, like, because I know you proposed to have railroads fit into the San Diego International Airport. I was just wondering what kind of benefits do we get out of that? Because personally, in the Philippines, none of our airports have like railroads nearby. Usually, we have people driving cars or taxis.
Yeah. Okay. So why do we want rail to come to the airport when actually you could get an Uber, Lyft, a bus, a shuttle to come to the airport? You could drive yourself and park, right? That's the question. So if you're a tourist and if you are a US citizens going to Europe, you get to the airport, say Frankfurt, Germany. When you get out of your terminal, the first thing you see is actually an open door to a train that takes you somewhere. And then you decide where you want to go. When you come to an airport like Los Angeles or San Diego, if you don't have a pre-rented car or an idea where you find a taxi or an Uber, you're lost. Tourism is a big industry in most nations, especially in a place like Southern California. Lots of people come to see us. It's really a shame that we don't offer them even another option. The car is the only option. So that's one reason. Second, remember in the beginning I talked about there's a certain segment of the population who don't have that luxury of getting in their car or paying for an Uber or Lyft. And those people need to access airports. And I think for them, we need to have that access. And finally, I would say, you know how many people die in our nation every year from car accidents? Give me a number. Every year.
50,000.
How much?
50,000.
45,000 people. The leading cause of death in the US from ages 1 to 34 is car accident. The third leading cause of death overall in the US after cataract and cancer is car accident. 45,000 every single year. You know how much that translates into? God forbid, 747 crashes every other week. If that happened, do you think we'll fly? I don't think so. So when we talk about this cost of driving, 45,000 of our countrymen and women losing their lives, the pollution, the productivity loss, I think we should promote other modes that are totally clean. An electric train coming in and going out. That's why I promoted in San Diego. We'll continue to promote. Thank you. Any other questions? Please go ahead.
Okay, so you were talking about VMTs and
Right.
how pricing is still free policy
Uh-huh.
for like. How do you ensure that a VMT tax does
Is
not
equitable.
land a vehicle mall travel tax, does not land on the shoulders of the working class?
Yeah, it's equitable, right? How do you guarantee it's equitable?
Because the city of Corona versus is a commuter.
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
live there because we can't afford to live in places where we
Right,
are.
right.
So how do you do that?
Okay. One of the biggest criticism is people push back on me when I promoted pricing here in LA and in San Diego. And they say, oh, you're going to hurt the poor. That's a perception. The reality is, by the way, yes, absolutely, some low income will be hurt by using a toll facility. But there is ways to give them back. So I'll give you an example. Los Angeles Metro opened the 10 and 110 hot lanes, high occupancy toll lanes. Any of you use them? Okay, so if you have a transponder, you're going on the 10 West, you can use them. You can save about 20 minutes. I use them, right? People, when we were trying to build this, when Stephanie Wiggin trying to promote this, the first thing they talk about is, oh my God, it's gonna hurt the poor. The actual data said, so you open those hot lanes, what happened? Some of the people who use the mixed flow moved them for a price. What happened? They freeze capacity for the other lanes. So the other lane user benefited. Number two, the money that generated from this get reinvested in other modes. And this money could go back if you prove that you use the 10 and you're low income or your income is below 45,000, you get money in the bank. I mean, you get money, you can get check in the mail for that. So yeah, in some cases it will definitely hurt the people who use it, but there is ways to overcome that. Overall, it's going to benefit everybody, especially the poor.
If I can push back slightly.
Yeah.
So the city of Corona got, these paid lanes.
The toll lanes, yeah, on the 91, yeah.
And the argument was made this will free up the free lanes.
Yeah.
Traffic has actually gotten worse
Well,
because what it created was sprawl.
Mhm.
So there's development happening further east because these freeways got.
Absolutely.
So
You know,
how do you control for that?
because you do, if the reason sprawl happened and you're getting worse,
Mhm.
because you're selecting 91 is going to have a toll and the other routes is not. If you do an area-wide system, it will not happen, that sprawl.
They're all controlled by the same agency.
I know, that's my point. That's my point is the biggest challenge is that disconnect the fragmented government entity. But the idea of pricing that it's going to make things worse is not true at all. People react to price. I mean, there is every single research paper was written. I hired a couple of amazing researchers from UCLA to look into why transit ridership is declining, even pre-COVID. And the reason is people are owning more cars because in the prime lending, people had it, everybody bought a car. The point is, if you do a pricing strategy that's area-wide, that what's happening in Corona will not happen at all. But right now, we're just doing it, piecemealing it to the point where it doesn't work. Okay? Okay. All right. Well, thank you. That was a great being with you. Great questions.
If you mind if I just my
Yeah, please.
Perfect. So I was wondering, kind of like the students in the audience, do you have any particular maybe educational paths or professional paths you'd recommend students to take if they want to go into transportation policy in the future?
Yeah. So, I was telling you earlier, I think transportation planning / engineering is a good path. A public policy, urban planning is another path. I think there is more of a need of a public policy thinkers right now because I tell, some of my students at USC, graduate student, I teach a planning course, land use and transportation. And some of them, as recently as last week, was telling me, we're frustrated. We're about to graduate from a great institution. We paid a lot of money, but we learn here and there, but we don't have that skill. And I pushed back on them. And I said, if you're coming to school to learn skills, you're coming to the wrong place. You come to school to learn how to think, how to critically think, how to approach problems. I think public policy majors are the best equipped to approach and critically think about the major issues we have. Because skills you could learn. by getting trained. You could learn at the job. You could learn from books. But you cannot learn this critical thinking, and that's where I think public policy. But if you're in public policy and you're really interested in transportation, you should look into urban transportation or engineering.
Right. I think that will conclude our Q&A segment for the day. I'd like to thank Mr. Akrala for joining us for this UCR community seminar, as well as his leadership and work in the transportation policy field. Thank you as well for our audience members today for attending, and we hope to see you all at our upcoming school public policy events. On May 15th, we'll be hosting for the next water seminar. On May 22nd, the Frisbee Center of Crime and Justice Studies will hold a seminar on street vending, illegality, and the community in Los Angeles by Dr. Rosia Rosales of UCI. You can learn more about events like these hosted by the UCI School of Public Policy by visiting our website at spt.uco.edu. While you're there, you can also learn about a Master of Public Policy program, as well as a combined BA/FPP program. You can also listen to an additional podcast series, Policy Chats. Thank you everyone again for joining us. Please feel free to grab some refreshments and talk to a guest speaker before he leaves. And once again, we look forward to seeing you at the next UCS School Public Policy event.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're walking to the dean, right?
Yes. We'll just do that in a few minutes after.
Okay, that's fine.
Also, Mr. Akrala, we have a thank you small.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
We just wanted to get a brief photo as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let's do that.